we are starting a new quilt along on this beautiful quilt by Joan Breece. Orange red thread, because there is this wonderful color. It was kind of the first one I want to do is this guy. I want to do the one closest to the seam, and then the second one will be closest to the edge. And the reason that is because if I did the one closest to the edge and I'm scooching my ruler, I don't want to move any fullness down toward the seam and have obvious fullness be there or puckering. This kind of will help prevent that. Get rid of my extra chalk. Okay. Now, I'll pause my machine. Feel under there, everything feels good tension-wise. And I like to do needle down so that when I move the machine, I don't get a jig. Less of a chance to get that if I stop needle down. I'm typically not a big fan of the needle down because we have computerized systems, and that could be a disaster when I'm using those machines, but in something like this. And on my computer systems, whenever I use needle down, I make sure to put a little sticky note right on the front of my machine. Change to needle up. When finished. And I'll just come back and forth just a little bit on the way up for about an inch, and I know those stitches are locked. Pull away, grab, pop, pull. Knot is up within the quilt now. There we go. Now I'll do that top. Now, here is where I'm running into a little bit of fullness here. Now this is a seam, so that's okay. But here where there's just a little bit of fullness, the temptation is of course to slide my ruler this way, and do you see on our camera B how when I do that, I'm sliding that because there's fullness here. When I slide like this, do you see how that pushes that fullness and it's actually creating more fullness? So when I see that I've got some fullness happening there, I want to make sure that when I come to a stop like I did there, that I would go ahead now and I would lift my ruler and then place it down, because now what it's done is it's redistributed this fullness, so I'm not pushing and creating puckers within the quilt. I'm going to have a little puckering because it's full, but I just don't want to have a ton. And see, now that's distributed that pretty nice. Even though with the front on camera you see that this will go away once we get the design in. Back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, right on that line. Do my tie off. What I might actually do at this point is, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my thread. And before I make the decision about what I'm going to do up here, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ditch between here and then do those ends here. And then I can look at that as a whole and evaluate, okay, what's really going to work best there. So now I'm going to ditch between the second border and the design elements. Okay. Switch to my longer guy. And again, you see how sliding that ruler just gives me a little bit more control. Lock my stitches, tie off, and then I'm going to go back and do my 1/2 inch down from the red border and 1/2 inch up from the new ditch that I just did. Okay, so I've used my blue Marks Be Gone, and I went in 1/2 inch, and I'm going to go all the way around. Now, I marked this outer one. One of the reasons that I made sure to mark this is because as I go up, I can use my ruler measurements here, but when I get to the top, I don't like to have my ruler behind. And so I went ahead and marked that in the blue Marks Be Gone across. But now since I'm doing this, my ruler can stay right on the seam all the way up and all the way over. So I really don't have to mark that. I just place it. So I've got my ruler there. I place it right 1/4 inch, because remember we got a 1/4 inch hopping foot, so 1/2 inch would be, my line is on the 1/4 inch, which will give me a 1/2 inch sew line. Push my hopping foot right against there. I'm going to go ahead now and lock my stitches. Got that lined up. Gonna come up. I'm gonna pause where I think it's gonna be, and thank goodness my eye is good. I've got that, and now I would work my way across. But I'll use my longer guy, and I'm gonna keep my 1/4 inch right on that seam line. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do in this border yet. I need to think about that this evening. But what I am going to definitely do here is I want to do some piano keys in this middle. Because I'm going to be putting filler here of some sort or some sort of design in around these crescents, um, I want the straight lines of the piano key and then another design out here. Because I don't want to have busy quilting and then a design and then piano key. I want to kind of divide the two spaces with the piano keys in this particular border area. So the first thing I'm going to mark is my center. That is the center, and there's 7 blocks, so this is 3.5 blocks in. That's how I'm doing that. And then I'm going to go down to my left side and I'm going to work my way from the corner in. And I think because I have this diagonal guy here that I'm going to be putting a line right through the center. I will go ahead and not do the fan design in the corner. I think I'm going to go ahead and give myself a cornerstone because I don't want this to then interfere with that visually. Even though you might instinctually think, ah, but it would carry through. Yeah, but it would carry through too much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide over. I'm going to make a decision on how wide I want those piano keys. And let me see. Let me just do a quick. Here is my brain working. Hear the silence? Yeah, right. Okay, so it's actually about 4¼ inches. So there's not really a divisible, um, um, evenly divisible deciding measurement that I would use there. So I'm just going to use a generic 1 inch. And I am just going to go ahead and I'm going to give myself um, the ticks. Now let me see. I'm going to be using my ditch ruler. So I don't need to mark all of these, but what I do need to do is, since I'm going to be doing the piano keys, I'm going to follow the line that I've already sewn because it will be in the same white thread. And so I'm going to go over. I think I'm going to go up and down rather than over, down, up, because I will actually be able to see a little better as I do that. So I'm just going to line that up, make it a little easier on myself. Dun, dun, dun. And you'll see as I quilt that out, with just that little tick there, when I use my ditcher, I'll make sure to line up my straight line here with the seam there so that way it will stay straight. So when I come over and my needle hits that spot and this line is there, I'll go straight up and down. That way we won't lean one way or the other. Okay, now I am going to work my way into the center. So I'll line that out. Tick, 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 tick. And it's 1¼ inch to the center there. And so I do like to have my oddball in the center. So my oddball on both sides will be about 1¼ inch, as long as her quilt is evenly measured there. So I'm going to head down to my right side and repeat that same process and head back towards the middle so that my oddball is not on the end. And my seasoned folks, I know you understand why we do that. Okay, so now I'm going to line that up. Cornerstone. No idea what I'm putting in the cornerstone yet. And I will work my way over. Tick, tick. Okay, so here we are. Let's get a close-up in here. So when I line this up, now I divided, let's get right over here, Mr. Ritchie. Okay, so I used the center of her block to mark the middle of the quilt here, which means that when I came this way, that left 1.25 inches. So that would also mean that when I came this way, when I would end there, it would leave 1.25 inches. It does not. So within her piecing, if you widen the shot a little bit, within, let's get that shot a little bit wider, a little bit more, nice, right there. Okay, so within her piecing here, as she sewed her squares together, she's lost a scant here and again. So which has thrown the balance of this quilt off a little bit. So it is my job to kind of realign that balance a little bit. Now I'm not going to move middle because the middle, this has to stay kind of the middle, so to speak. But what I do want to do is I want this last one to end up being 1.25 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little line there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, how can I balance that just a little bit? Because here is what the eye is going to do. Once I put these piano keys in, right? What'll happen is if I start here and I do inch, 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 and get to this one and it's way off compared to this other center one, the eye is going to see that because the eye does two things. It looks at both ends and then it looks at the center. What it does not particularly focus on, unless you are a quilt judge, who is actually has a trained eye, is you wouldn't be looking at this interim area. So I want to kind of slowly nudge this with just a little bit off from the inch all the way to here. But I want the first few of these to be 1 inch since the eye would focus on the middle. So we'll do that. And now we can kind of nudge the rest of these. So we'll just take that. Let me look at that. Okay, so we'll take that off 1 inch a little bit. Okay, we'll make these 1 inch. And we'll kind of divide that space a little bit. So now the eye is not going to pick up that extra 1/2 inch that I worked into this particular area. So that's kind of how I deal with stuff when we have a little bit of nudging to do. So we want to make sure not to do all the nudging in the middle or on the ends. We kind of want to work it in equally, and we work it in equally. We don't just do put that 1/2 inch in somewhere it's going to stand out. We work a little bit in a few places. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to think on this border a little bit before I actually quilt this, because I always want to make sure to quilt my outer border at least at the top first. And give me a little time and then we'll come back and I will decide what I'm doing with that outer border, and then we'll come down here, we'll quilt that, and then we'll move down into the beautiful body of this quilt.